Okay, this is part 3 of the Belle Epoch, the beautiful age, the golden age of Europe, which is the 1800s, especially the latter part of the 1800s, like 1871 after the Prusso-Franco War and before World War II. And this was the theme for tonight's lecture is going to be about the great landscape painters, because the landscape painters of the 1800s are the best that ever lived. They were magnificent, okay? The first one we're going to talk about is Frederick Edwin Church. And in a sense, this is all related to the Hudson River School, where Thomas Cole was the great, magnificent landscape painter, and Frederick Edwin Church was almost seen like in competition with Thomas Cole. And Frederick Edwin Church traveled to Ecuador to paint some of the incredible scenes there too. And the other thing too is everybody you've been trained in the public schools to badmouth Western civilization, Western Christian civilization, but the reality is Western Christian civilization is almost synonymous with civilization. It was the Western Christians that went and studied nature in other places. They studied nature in other countries, okay? The Pima Indians didn't come to the United States to study America. The United States scientists went to study the Tarahumara and the other ones out there, okay? So there's a tremendous Catholic Christian tradition of science and civilization that has been beneficial to the entire world. And these paintings are just magnificent. They're the greatest landscape paintings ever made. If you know of better ones, please let me know. I'd be happy to look for them. I've been looking for a long time. So here's Cotopaxi volcano in Ecuador. And it also sort of reminds one of this idea of the origins of the earth, the creation of God, okay? Okay, here's another painting by Frederick Edwin Church, and this one is in the heart of the Andes. Okay, you got all of these elements of a beautiful landscape, the mountains, the sky, the sunrise, the waterfall. And here is the mountain of the Holy Cross. So you can see the Holy Cross up there in the mountain in snow. And this one is by Thomas Moran, the American artist. So America has really the best landscape painters ever. Here's the Grand Canyon of Yellowstone Park. You can see the waterfall, the rapids coming in through. It's rather beautiful. Okay, now wait till you see this guy. This is Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains by Albert Bierstadt, painted in 1868. And as far as I can tell, he's the greatest landscape painter who ever lived. Look at the magnificent beauty of this, This don't make you believe in God. I mean, it's just too much. You have all the deers coming up to the shore. You got the mallards there getting ready to take off. It's just magnificent. It's stunning. Okay, I was lucky enough to go to these places when I was out in California, and they're magnificent. They're just as magnificent in real life as they are in the painting. So here's another version, same artist, Albert Bierstadt, 1873, Sierra Nevada. So Sierra means saw, Nevada is the state, and it's just beautiful. Okay, and here's Among the Sierra Nevada Mountains, sort of a different time of the day, the lighting, again, it's magnificent. Okay, here is the Monarch of the Glen. This is by a Scottish painter, Edwin Landseer. Magnificent buck stag there. Okay, here's Lake Tahoe by Albert Bierstadt. And again, it's just beautiful. It's sublime. Okay, you have a religious feeling when you look at that. Okay, and another magnificent painting by Albert Bierstadt, 1877, Mount Corcoran. You can see a bear coming up to the water's edge. Okay, now here's a painting by a Russian artist, Ivan Shishkin, in 1889. And it's Morning in the Forest. So all the bear cubs are playing around and the mama bear is watching them. Okay, and one of the points I'd like to make is, nowadays Russia is kind of like a third world crap hole because it became communist. Okay, after it became communist, it became a third world crap hole, and there aren't any good paintings from Russia. There aren't any good books other than the ones written to mock the place, like Dr. Zhivago by Boris Pasternak, or Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn. Okay, anything that becomes atheist becomes a shithole. Okay, that's just a fact of life, and you need to know that because the Christians right now are kind of weak and stupid. The priesthood of the Christianity has been taken over by homos and pedophiles, and everything's kind of, and the current Pope is a antichrist piece of crap. So right now the organized church is in a shambles. It's about its weakest point. The 503 exemption rules have been essentially castrated the church. And so the organized church is very weak. It's really the underground church in the Christians themselves that are trying to preserve civilization. Because civilization was headed into the garbage can. You know, all of Europe is being destroyed, as well as Australia and New Zealand. All the Western countries and Ireland are being actively, rapidly destroyed. So hopefully freedom and beauty and all this good stuff will be preserved. Okay, that's one of the things I'm trying to do with this YouTube channel. Because look how magnificent it is. You have to understand, all this multicultural system, it's BS. Other cultures don't make art. The cavemen made art, but most of these other civilizations don't. They're backward and primitives in comparison to Christianity. You need to know that. Christianity is worth preserving. Western civilization is worth preserving. It's not just a good civilization, it's the best civilization. Okay, and the alternative is to end up a third world crap hole like Russia. Okay, we don't want that. All right, here's Frederick Edwin Church, and I'm going to just get myself off the picture. Look how magnificent it is, Niagara Falls. It's just, again, it's sublime. It's beyond good. It's magnificent, okay? Each of these works of art, these are masterpieces. You get the same religious feeling like going to the Sistine Chapel to look at this, okay? And here is, Frederick Edwin Church, above the clouds at sunrise. It's like the dawn of life on earth. It's just beautiful, sublime, good. Like Bishop Barron had said, when people see Christian art, they say, my, is this beautiful? And as they look at it some more and see it's beautiful, they say, well, my, is this good? And they say, my, is this good? Isn't this true about what is beautiful and right and good in life? And that gives you an appreciation for Christianity, because Christianity generates all this. Non-Christian cultures don't generate almost any art. 99.99% of good art is Christian, okay? It's almost like saying good art's almost like saying Christian art. Okay, here is Expulsion from Eden, okay, by Thomas Cole. So there's Adam and Eve walking out of the Garden of Paradise. They screwed up. Okay, here's the bestial, savage phase of civilization. Okay, once you start talking about the phases of civilization, you start getting into, the Vico Titler stuff, the Giambattista Vico stuff, cycles of civilization, primitive man, here he is. There's like teepees or something there. Okay, so here is the log cabin settlers, like the first Americans from Europe were settlers. Here they are out on the west. Homesteader Family Farm by Thomas Cole. Okay, here's a painting, Cottage at the Edge of the Forest. This one by Josefina Hamlins, a lady artist, 1890, from Sweden. Rather beautiful picture there. And this is Arcadia Pastoral Scene. Again, this is more Thomas Cole. And again, Thomas Cole was sort of the landmark, magnificent artist of around the 1830s, 1840s in the Hudson River School. And he did the great story paintings. We're going to get to those, The Voyage of Life and The Consummation of Empire. They're magnificent. And this Arcadia Pastoral Scene is sort of an idealized view of the ancient Greeks at peace. Okay. Here's Oxbow, Connecticut River. And again, this is Thomas Cole from 1836. And so again, it's just beautiful. And that idea of God as a creator, man is created in the image of God, therefore man too can be a creator. We can, honor God by making paintings that honor his creations. Like Bach, every composition was to the glory of God. Isaac Newton, everything I figure out is, trying to understand God's creation. Kepler is like that. Michael Faraday is like that. It's pretty typical. Here's the Hay Wain by John Constable in 1821. Beautiful idea of the family farm. And as Thomas Jefferson had said, we would have been better off if we maintained that idea of family farms in America. We wouldn't be at the mercy of processed food and all this BS. Okay, here's Weavenhoe Park Farm by John Constable, 1816. Again, quite beautiful. And, there's a place for animals, even though they're not the healthiest food as we get older and we have to counteract our dietary mistakes when we're younger. There's a place for animals in the food processing part. And we should definitely keep the backup supply of food so we don't get starved to death. Here's Fox Caught in a Trap by Gustave Courbet. Kind of a sad picture, but there's something interesting about that. Here's The Sower of the Crops by Vincent van Gogh. And Vincent van Gogh, during his lifetime, he never sold one painting. Okay, and he was a great artist in his own way. A little crazy, of course, but a great artist. Here are The Harvest in Ukraine by Mykola Pimonenko. And again, like I said, Ukrainians and Russians actually had a lot of creative artistic talent. Look at Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the greatest novelists to ever live. Okay, Tolstoy, by the way, is a crappy novelist. He had good accuracy of perception, but he had no ability to transmit useful meaning. And there were other ones that were pretty decent. You know, I like Chekhov, for example. Okay, and there was some other stuff that was pretty decent. Pushkin. Okay, so anyways, here's harvest in Ukraine. And look at the current situation in Ukraine. What is the purpose of the current situation in Ukraine? Nothing is accomplished other than Western Christian men. Well, they're not Western. They're Eastern Slavic Christian men are being killed. Okay, that's basically it. Okay, and you think the planners didn't know that going in? No, they knew exactly that that's what would happen. All the women who want to be equal, they flee, and all the guys get killed. Okay, and it's a rather stupid, pointless thing, and it's still ongoing. And we had hoped that an end would be put to that unnecessary conflict, but it's not. You know, it's just a you know what side of the Ukrainian Christian men. That's what's happening there. And Christians are too stupid to see the pattern. Okay, here is Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. Beautiful painting there. Okay, and then here is sort of like the dawn of civilization, where mankind really moved a step up, is with the ancient Greeks. The ancient Greeks are like probably the most interesting historical group you'll ever study in your life. They're just as interesting as the Italian Renaissance, as the Belle Epoch, you know, Golden Age of Europe, Victorian Renaissance, Catholic Revival, all the different names for the 1800s. We're not going to talk about them right now. I've got tons and tons of paintings of life amongst the ancient Greeks. This is actually going to lead into part 4 of this series of lectures on the Belle Epoch, the Golden Age of art and culture in Europe. But this is just a painting of the Parthenon, again by Frederick Edwin Church. So I hope you enjoyed that. And that'll be the end for today for part 3 of the Belle Epoch, Art of the Belle Epoch.